What's good, ballers? So, odd week last week. A down week for me. I still hit on most of my 50-50 lineups, but it was a close one on quite a few of them. Gonna look to turn it around this week, where it seems like a much more interesting week. Last week, a lot of the big names off the main slate. So this week is looking a lot better. We've got at quarterback, for me, it's pretty simple where I'm going. I really only have two guys that I'm looking at. I got Jameson Winston at 7,800 at Cincinnati. So Cincinnati just got torn apart by Kansas City. Most teams do by Kansas City, but their defense just looked bad, and this should be a shootout, knowing how bad Tampa Bay's defense is. So this is a game to target. Andy Dalton is the same price as Winston, and I think we can just trust Winston a lot more. Andy Dalton, I don't think is a bad option, but I've just lost a bit of faith in him. Dropping down, I got Baker Mayfield at 7,200 playing at Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh likes to throw when they're at home, so this could be a shootout type game. I imagine Cleveland's going to have to be catching up, so Mayfield should be able to stack up a lot of yards, translate that into fantasy points. I'm just going to real quick go through why I don't really like the other quarterback options we got over here. So just give me 1 second. So up top, we got Patrick Mahomes, who I do like. Patrick Mahomes is where it's at. But at 9,200, I just think that price tag is too much. I think it'd be hard for him to hit value. He should still hit value, but it's when there's these other quarterbacks that I think can score as much as him, and it's pretty tight the rest of the way. So I'd avoid that. Tom Brady against Buffalo, not a bad option, but also expensive. And if I'm paying up, I'd rather just go with Mahomes. Drew Brees outside of the dome is a bit sketchy, so I'd avoid that. Even though Minnesota is a defense you can pass on, I'd still avoid him outside of the dome. Aaron Rodgers looks like a good play. That knee is still worrisome. Any week he could go down and really tank your lineup for the week. Any player can get hurt, but he's already hurt. It's just not really worth it. Jared Goff could be a good play, but Green Bay is a lot easier to run on than they are to pass. There's going to be enough points to go around to make him worth it. But this is Gurley week for me. Ben Roethlisberger is at home, so he should pass more. But last time against Cleveland, he didn't do anything. He had a horrible game. So, when they're in division games, you saw with Baltimore playing at home, it's not the same. Andrew Luck, I think this is where it gets to be a playable match. Indy's come on with a running game, but that didn't stop Andrew Luck last week. He still had 4 touchdowns, but he did only throw 23 times. So you got to wonder if being up on Oakland, if they're going to run and those touchdown passes just don't come. And Andrew Luck just turns out to be a 15-point quarterback. Kirk Cousins is going up against New Orleans. But again, like I said, New Orleans is a different team outside of the dome. This could turn into more of a defensive match, which we've seen the Saints get in when they're outside of that dome. Just a little bit worrisome, but Kirk Cousins I do think is a good play this week. I just feel safer and get to save some money going down to Winston. Cam playing Baltimore is tough. Mitch Trubisky has been doing really well. Not necessarily in how well he's been playing, but for fantasy purposes. But he's not going to be in a shootout this week, more than likely. This is a game where they should be able to run the ball. That's why I'm a little worried about Cohen, because he's been making his living off passes, the running back for Chicago. So I just think this is going to be less scoring than we've seen. Mitch Trubisky can get some points on the run, but I just think he's a little bit more sketchy. So, basically going down this list, like, there's just question marks, I feel like, around each of the other quarterbacks. Going to running backs, Todd Gurley is up at 11 grand, but still well worth it if you can fit him in your budget. I think there are enough other running back options that you can get 3 solid running backs in your lineup and not have to pay up for Gurley. And those options I'm looking at as my top 3, if I'm going 3 stud running backs, it's going to be Kareem Hunt at 8,100 versus Denver, James Conner at 8 grand versus Cleveland. So last time he played Cleveland, he had 31 rushing attempts for 135 yards, 2 touchdowns, 5 receptions for 57 yards, totals 192 yards. They are probably going to pass a bit more this week in Pittsburgh, but looking at that last week, possibly that you can really rely on Connor. I think he's a solid bet to put in your lineup. James White with Sony Michel out this week, 7,800 at Buffalo is a lock. Until Sony Michel comes back, James White, I think, is pretty set every week in your lineup, I guess, unless they raise the price enough. But for now, at 7,800, I don't think you can really beat it. Marlon Mack going down at 6,700 at Oakland is looking like a great play. He had a great match last time. Oakland gives up a lot to the run, and they gave him 19 rushing attempts last week. So I think you can count on him getting 15 to 20 touches in the game, maybe more, and Oakland giving up some big runs. So I think that's a good play. Kerryon Johnson is 200 more, 6,800 versus Seattle. So Seattle and Detroit both are pretty bad against the run. So count on that being 2 teams running a lot against each other. And I think getting Kerryon Johnson is a good bet with how much they're going to run. I would love to get a Seattle running back on my team if I knew who was going to be their running back, but it's hard to say. So I'd just like to avoid that whole situation. Moving down, we got Philip Lindsay at 6,500 playing Kansas City. It is at Kansas City, and so they are a different team at home, so that's something to think about. But if Royce Freeman is out of this game, he's questionable right now. If he is out, then I think getting that starting running back, Kansas City played really well last week, but we still haven't seen enough to say that they're a decent defense now, and that it wasn't just Cincinnati blowing it. So I think they're a good play. I think Philip Lindsay is a good play. And if Matt Breida is out, he's questionable right now. Mostert has been running really well for San Francisco. He's down at 5,600 at Arizona, one of the worst, I think the worst run defense in the league. So Alfred Morris isn't the running back there. If Breida is out, then Mostert has to be considered a starter. And at 5,600, getting the starting running back against the Arizona Cardinals seems like a lock. So just pay attention to that injury. Then we got at the wide receiver section. So Adam Thielen is an every week play. If you can fit him in your lineup, he's 8,800 You can pay down for a couple of these running backs, especially if Freeman or Breida is out. It should get a lot easier to fit them in. So 8,800 against New Orleans. So Marshawn Lattimore should line up against Stephon Diggs. And this will be the best wide receiver in Adam Thielen, who is going up against the rest of the Saints secondary. So, yeah, he should dominate that game. We've just seen the number 2 wide receiver on the team playing the Saints light it up, and Adam Thielen is the best one of them. So, throw him in there. Michael Thomas at 8,600 in the same game. If points are scored, they're going to be scored in the air because both teams are pretty solid against the run. So you got to scratch Michael Thomas in for a touchdown or two, and he should get back closer to his old beginning of season self. You know, they got a lot of weapons there now. So I think week 1, week 2, Michael Thomas is a thing of the past, but back to high-end number 1, Michael Thomas, I think, is coming up. Devontae Adams has been the second highest scoring wide receiver, I believe. Second or third. He has just been great this year, and he's not being priced that way. He's down, I mean, I guess he is, you know, he's 8,600. So, I mean, I guess he is, but he is playing the Rams. The Packers are getting a lot of weapons back. That should take some pressure off of him, you know, and I think he'll lose some targets, but I think he demands to keep close to the volume he's been getting. So, throw him in there. I think in that shootout, there's going to be some points to be had, and he should get some of them. Now, Emmanuel Sanders, per game points, he's number 6 in the league, and he's down at 7,200, and he's playing Kansas City. They're in Kansas City, so it's a tough place to play, but still, Emmanuel Sanders is a great play this week if his injury is all good. So that's something you got to pay attention to. As long as he's in the game, though, I think he's a great play up at 7,200. Down a bit, Boyd had another off game, but he's playing Tampa Bay this week. The whole Cincinnati offense just tanked. Throw that bad performance on Andy Dalton and not on Boyd or on the coaching staff, whatever you want to call it. But the whole offense tanked. Boyd didn't really have much of a chance, but he's playing Tampa Bay this week, and at 6,800, you can't beat that. And dropping down 100, you got Jarvis Landry at Pittsburgh. There's just a lot of good options. Players with good matchups that aren't too expensive. He went off last week and playing Pittsburgh. There's going to be enough points to be had. Pittsburgh's pass defense is horrendous, and Jarvis Landry is the number 1 on that offense. Finally came on last week, so he should be a good bet. Godwin, I think, is a little more risky, but he has been getting more playing time. He's passed Deshaun Jackson as the number 2 wide receiver the past 2 weeks as far as playing time goes. He's 6,300, and they're playing Cincinnati, who can get shredded. That should be a shootout. Get a piece of that with Godwin. I think he's as good a bet as anybody to score, and he's been getting more playing time, and he's just mega talented. We got Will Fuller. So QT looks like he's going to be out. And if Kiki is out, then Will Fuller could step back in to his monster game role. And at 6,200 versus Miami, you really can't beat that. That number 2 spot on that team is really valuable, and especially now with QT out, it being legitimate number 2. There's just the 2 options there. So yeah, get Will Fuller in your lineup. Geronimo Allison is coming back. He's questionable still, but see how he does in practice this week. There's going to be a lot of points in that Rams Packers game, and at 5,700, Geronimo Allison was performing good before he got hurt. Count on him to come back in if you need to save some money. Amendola at 5,400 with Stills and Wilson both out. He's their number one receiver on Miami, and they're playing Houston. So, I believe that's the Thursday night game, though. So this is only for Thursday lineups, but Amendola is a great way to save some money. And if you need to save even more money, at 5,100, Traquan Smith against Minnesota. Again, most of the points in that game are going to be scored in the passing game, and so the number 2 option on the Saints should be a good bet to get a decent amount of receptions and potentially a touchdown. Going to tight ends. Not really willing to pay up for any of the tight ends this week. Kelsey is always a good play, but he also hasn't been performing great the past 3 weeks. And so I think you can just pay down. We got O.J. Howard at 5,800 versus Cincinnati, at Cincinnati. Njoku is my play of the week, 5,700 at Pittsburgh. He's been getting a ton of receptions. I think it's 7, 11, 12, 7 the past 4 weeks. And so count on him continuing to get receptions, and against Pittsburgh, who gives up a ton of points to the tight end. I think they're 1 or 2 easiest matchup for a tight end. So 5,700, you got to bet on Njoku. I'm putting him in most of my lineups. And then McDonald, if you want to change things up a bit, he's a bit riskier, but you get to save a little bit of money, $400 down at 5,300, and he's in that Cleveland game, so should be enough to go around. He had 8 targets last week, 7 catches for 68 yards. So I don't think he's a bad play. I don't think he's as good a play as Njoku, but if you want to diversify your lineup a bit, maybe throw McDonald in one of them. And for defenses, we got the Patriots against Buffalo for 4,600. Try and pay up for them if you can. Buffalo is just horrible on offense, and now with LaShawn McCoy out, that's just another notch in the coffin, another nail in the coffin. So throw the Patriots D in with confidence, and if you want to save some money, if you need to save that money, go down to Baltimore for 3,700 at Carolina. Baltimore's a top D in the league, and Carolina's not bad, but Cam Newton can turn the ball over, and they're not an elite offense that they're going up against. So there you have it. Come back on Saturday with another video. Maybe I'll get one coming up of injuries to watch, but good luck this week. Y'all be easy.